I was asked about a month or so ago if I would create a presentation to kind of talk to business owners about how to think for themselves about what they're doing as well as talking to their employees. And of course, when that was happening, it was middle end of March when the stock market looked a lot different than it does today. So we were pretty close to the bottom of the stock market free fall. And so some of these slides would be colored by that because that's when I started the presentation. But keep in mind that history tends to repeat itself. And so even if some things may not apply right now, they should be able to apply in the future. So let's just take a look here, see if I can get the screen going for us. Who would have thought that this little thing could cause so much trouble? So if you're a music fan, you probably recognize the words "ball of confusion" or song "Ball of Confusion." So what happened with this coronavirus? Well, that triggered a lot of different things. We've got all these medical tests going on. We've got a bunch of new rules, things that probably your mom used to tell you to do and nag at you from the time you were 3 or 4 years old all the way through high school until you could get away to college and be on your own and not wash your hands anymore, and before supper and afterwards and stuff like that. But we've got all these new rules that we're having to pay attention to and taking care of ourselves. We've got a new term called social distancing, which I'd never heard of that term before, so I don't know if that's brand new just for this or if that's just how out of touch I am. But obviously we've got a kind of a new normal, which also includes wearing masks. A lot of times out in public, I know people that you drive down the street and they're wearing them in their car. So this is just a whole different world that we live in, which we hadn't experienced before. Other strange happenings: school's not going on. All the kids are at home. Nobody's at the playground. Nobody's in class learning. And then, unfortunately, Main Street is more or less closed. And that's part of what's kind of sparking a lot of the trauma that's going on, because we just don't know what's going to happen with not only our own businesses, but friends of ours, colleagues, people that we depend on. We can't even get any toilet paper. Oil prices have collapsed. In fact, at one point in time, you could give away a barrel of oil and get $12, $13, $20 in return. So not only was it less expensive than a bucket of chicken, you could actually get it for free, which is kind of a scary thought. And of course, all of those things culminate in the stock market going down because everybody's scared. Nobody knows really what's going on. And when nobody knows what's going on, the market doesn't like that. It doesn't like uncertainty. One of the things that probably several people have heard about on the news from time to time is that if you look at the red bars here, 2 of the largest drops in the Dow Jones average history happened in March. So again, when I was being contacted by Jill and Tammy about possibly putting together a presentation, it was shortly after March 16th. And that was now the 3rd largest drop in the Dow, one-day drop in the Dow that we've ever had. And that's in comparison to kind of the Black Monday and Black Friday, October 19th and October 28th, that you see here, that were kind of the I would call them historic days in the stock market. Well, now we've added a couple more to go with that. The other thing that's happening behind the scenes, and part of the reason I got involved in financial planning in the first place, had a lot to do with my family experience. And so one of the things that the Federal Reserve has pointed out in one of their annual reports is that basically 40% of adults can't cover a $400 emergency that hits their world. Now that's pretty scary. When you think about the number of unemployment claims we have right now, in my view, even though I don't have the exact numbers or know exactly how it correlates, I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that the reason that there's so many unemployment claims is, one, we've got a lot of businesses shut down, but 40% of the people in our country that are working, they have to have income. That stimulus check that came through from the CARES Act, the money that comes from an unemployment check, if they're not working full time, they're needing that to make just basic payments on basic necessities, which is probably pretty scary to a lot of people on this call, because probably most of the people that are attending have been relatively successful. And but that's not how the average person lives, and that just adds to the uncertainty and the craziness of all the things that are going on. The other thing that I think is important to recognize now, we're in a 24-hour news cycle. We cannot get away from the news. And what does the news like to do? It likes to talk about all that's bad. And so when you're hearing bad news all the time, while you're also worried about what's happening at your job, how are things going with your kids, they're coming home from school and you're having to help them with their schoolwork at home while you work. Uh, there's a lot of things to create anxiety. One of the scientific things that we can kind of point to is this idea of amygdala hijacking. So the amygdala is part of your brain that helps you either fight or flight. That's the initial response when you're in trouble. Your brain takes over. This certain part of your brain takes over and takes care of you. And so you don't have to think about, hey, should I jump out of the way of a moving car? You just do it. Or if a saber-toothed tiger was chasing you back in the day, you knew to run away as opposed to stand there and hope to pet it. So those are things that are happening, but because we can't get away from that 24-hour news cycle, it's really hard for our brain to process all of the information that we're receiving and know what to do. And since the brain is the most sophisticated machine on the planet, that news is really weighing on it, gumming it up, covering it up, slowing it down, and confusing it. And if we took another view of this same thing that's maybe less scientific looking, what's happening is when our emotions get so out of whack, they get so high and excited and stuff like that, it really shuts down the rest of our brain. And so we end up making bad decisions because of that. For those of you that may not know me, got a little bit of an odd sense of humor, but I was a big Saturday Night Live fan back in the day. So for those of you that remember Toonces the Driving Cat, sometimes odd things happen or strange things, and it seems normal, but maybe not really. But then we realize, hey, something's going on and we don't really know what's happening and we're starting to get scared. And then we just go off the cliff. And obviously that's not a good thing, but that's part of what's happening in our brains is we start taking in all that news, we start taking in all this information, we're trying to process it, figure out what direction we're going. And sometimes we just end up hopping in a car and driving right off the cliff as a result of that. There's a lot of studies. This Dr. Rick Hansen from UC Berkeley I think is a prime example of studying how our brains work and how that impacts our decision making. And he's written a number of books, and this slide is from the presentation that he's given here a couple of years ago that I had heard. And I really think it makes sense to touch on this today, this idea of negativity bias. Your brain, because that amygdala is there to keep you alive, your brain is on a heightened alert to look out for bad stuff. And so it's constantly taking in bad things. And you can almost think of it as Velcro. All the bad things stick to your brain, but all the good times, the things that happen that you enjoy, hugs from your kids, a jog outside in the sunny weather, going to Culver's to get custard or something like that, all those fun things that you do, going to a ball game, whatever it happens to be, those are all good times, but your brain doesn't hold on to those in the same way. So in a way, your brain has a Teflon coating that bounces off the good stuff, but it attracts all the negative stuff. And so you can see here on a further slide, as these things are happening, we start to overcorrect, overcompensate, overfocus on bad. So think about the people that you know that are maybe glass half full type people. Those folks really struggle even more in times like this, which oftentimes leads to a bigger spike in mental health concerns for people, especially when they're by themselves. All they have to do is listen to the radio and watch TV and take in all that bad news and essentially drive themselves crazy. And that's a bad thing, obviously. So one of the terms that I've learned here in the last couple of years through one of the study groups that I'm in called Empowered Wealth, we talk a lot about what's called the VUCA world. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous. And that typically describes the world on a daily basis. But VUCA is really heightened in times like this because there's so much negativity. You don't know what to believe. Is the news true? Is it fake news? What's going on? And it makes it really, really difficult to focus and concentrate and make good decisions. Now, if anybody's been to a conference here in the last couple of years, I think you've probably heard this quote from Mike Tyson back when he was the heavyweight champion of the world. And what Mike was telling people after a fight is, everybody has a plan when they step into the ring until I punch them in the face. Now, I like that quote. It's pretty funny, and I can almost imagine Mike Tyson knocking my head clean off my body. But I've got to think that to a certain extent, that's a little hyperbole and really not true. If you're a professional boxer and you're getting in the ring with Mike Tyson and you really haven't thought about what's going to happen when Mike Tyson punches you, probably you don't belong in the ring. And so I would challenge people to think about, what's your plan to take advantage of the situation that we're in right now? What can you do with all of this assault against you and your business and your livelihood and stuff like that? What are you going to do? If we take another, see if my screen will catch up here. This is a map of the New York City subway system. Now, to me, this looks like a lot of spaghetti. Now, I've been on the subway system in New York, but it's really important to have a plan on where you're going so that you know what stop to get off on, because you might get on the green line, but if you're not paying really close attention, you might be taking that north instead of south and farther away from the heart of the city. Or you may not realize you need to hop off on the yellow line to get to the red line to get to your final destination. And so whether it's Mike Tyson punching you in the face or looking at a map that you can't read, you really got to start figuring out what you're doing in life and getting yourself prepared for what lies ahead. So what we really try and do is get people, at least our clients, we try and get them to stop and just take a breath. Everybody has a different way that they deal with stress. For some people, it's yoga or meditation or things like that. I happen to be a Christian, so I typically will just take time, especially at the first part of the day, before I get started with work and just pray and ask for wisdom and inspiration and guidance and discernment and things like that. But another easy way, if you're not a religious person or you don't have time for yoga or something like that, sometimes just sitting at your desk, closing your eyes and taking 3 deep breaths. Sometimes that's all you need to just take a step back and kind of get your bearings so that you can get started on the day and start making a difference for yourselves and your employees and your clients. Part of the reason I say that is, as a business owner, typically you've got multiple roles that you're fulfilling, and that makes this very difficult. And especially right now with the stock market being down, you're probably getting questions from your employees about, well, what are you doing? Or what should I do with my 401k? Or, should I be in the market or out of the market, and some of those things. So we're going to cover some of those basics, but then we're also later on going to move on to some additional practical steps that you can share with your employees and possibly take advantage of yourself. So to start, I think we have a couple of keys. So when times are tough, and especially when I thought I might be giving this talk when the market was still down 20 or 30%, a lot of times your employees are just looking for reassurance that you've been here before. And sometimes the easiest thing for you to do is just share a story of something that's happened to you where you've struggled and you've figured out a way to persevere. Sometimes employees like to know that you're human, even though you may not want to let them know that, or you don't think they should know that, that you're Superman or Superwoman. Um, but I think if you can humanize yourself in certain ways, it's easier to relate and empathize with what your employees are going through, especially those employees who might be in that earlier category of the 40% that are really having a hard time financially right now. So another thing that you can be sharing from a business owner standpoint is, hey, we've been here before. I know this slide is a little bit small and hard to read, but our friends at Transamerica allowed me to use that. And what I'm trying to do is just show that we've had pandemics before. I'm not a scientist, so it's hard for me to say if this one is as serious or more serious or less serious than anything else that you see on the screen. But you will notice, if you can read that small, back in 2009 during the financial crisis, we had the swine flu that appeared in April of 2009, about 2 or 3 weeks after the bottom of that market. And then all we did is see the stock market go up. And that was despite, 6 other occurrences. We had dengue fever, Ebola virus, measles, Zika, MERS, cholera, and then measles again. We've had multiple situations where these pandemics have seized the day, and yet the market has managed to power right through that. Another thing that I did want to point out as a part of this conversation today is I think there's a misnomer, and it's probably due to people in my line of work, financial advisors, that really don't do a good job of helping their clients understand the difference between risk and volatility. And so what do I mean by that? Well, you can see by this slide that from 2009 up through the first quarter of this year, March 31st, in 2009, there was almost 120 instances of the stock market, the S&P 500, being up or down more than 1% on any given day. Okay, so that's basically a third of the time that year the market was moving 1% or more. Well, that's happened multiple times. If you can see the average of 59 times during the year. Granted, 2020, we're only a part of the way through the year, but if you look at the far right-hand side, we still have a long way to go to catch 2009 when it comes to volatility. And when we talk about volatility, it just means that the market is seesawing back and forth. But if you don't need your money right now, if you don't need it for retirement, there's absolutely no reason that you should be concerned about volatility. If anything, you should embrace it. The farther you have before you need that money, the better volatility is, because it's allowing you to buy on regular intervals. Typically, when you're in a 401k, you're putting in money monthly or weekly or bi-weekly or something like that. It's giving you an opportunity to buy without regard to what the market is doing on a day-to-day basis. But if I can take a step back and talk about this idea of risk, I think financial advisors in particular need to do a better job of explaining to their clients that risk is happening all the time, every day. When the stock market is up 10%, it's still risky because you made 10%. If you can't afford to lose 10%, then you probably don't have any business risking your money trying to make 10%. Or you need to create a series of buckets or certain types of accounts that some are really conservative and some are a little more aggressive, and then some are really aggressive, so that you're not concerned about is the S&P 500 up or down or what's happening. And so we'll probably touch on that again, but I really do think that this is significantly important for the average employee who's participating in a 401k. When in 2019, when the market was up 30%, the market was still risky. It was still risky. It's just, it was risky to the good. And so we've got to start thinking about this a little bit differently and helping people recognize that if you can't be riskier, then you need to save more so that you don't have to put as much money at risk. And so this is just a chart, again, from friends at Franklin Templeton, talking about essentially over a 40-year period, how the market reacted on a year-by-year basis. The top number is what the market actually returned that year, but you'll see in the blue how far down the markets were in any particular time during that year. So if we look at 2008 in particular, if you could see that, the market finished negative, but it was much more negative during the year than what it actually finished. And then the same was true with 2009. It was negative for a lot of that year, but ended up finishing positive. In fact, ended up finishing up 26%. So some of this is probably old hat to a number of you, or you've heard these types of presentations from financial advisors before, but it really is important for people to recognize that these things are happening all the time. It's just that right now it's COVID-19 or coronavirus or whatever you want to call it. That's happening right now. So that's what we're hyper focused on. We forgot all about the measles and the SARS, and we forgot about the financial crisis and all of that kind of stuff. So we get ourselves sidetracked. A lot of times we're our own worst enemies. And the other thing that I think people need to think about is, you know, there's either a lot of really smart people, way smarter than me, or a lot of liars, because you're always going to talk to somebody who got out of the market, 2 days before the stock market went down. Well, good for them. Let's just say that they're telling the truth and they're super smart. Awesome. Good for them. That's fantastic. But the problem is they don't necessarily have a plan for getting back into the market. So as they sit on the sidelines, the longer they do that, the longer their money is not working for them. And you can see from this chart over a 20-year period, there's nothing wrong with having money in savings. In fact, you're going to see some slides coming up here where I'm going to encourage you to have money in a low interest bearing savings account. There is nothing wrong with that. What could be wrong is if you have too much money in those types of accounts, you may not be able to retire unless you can just save a tremendous amount of your income every year, because that money's not working for you while you're at work. So again, going back to this idea of having a plan and how am I going to get back into the market? Well, if you get out and you're fortunate, you're smart, you're lucky, good looking, tall, full head of hair, whatever your situation is that's allowed you to get out of the market before it went down. What's your plan to get back in? Because if you don't have a plan to do that, you can see some of the results are pretty staggering. In fact, if over the last basically 20 years, you missed the 30 best days over a 20-year period, that's a difference of almost 8.5% from a 5% return to a negative 4% return without those investment days. So everybody probably recognizes Warren Buffett. He just had his investment conference, I believe it was last week, a little curtailed compared to normal. But Warren Buffett is widely regarded to be one of the smartest people. But Warren Buffett, once again, is in the news because he's an idiot. Yes, he's a multi-billionaire idiot, but his company is sitting on $200 billion of cash and hasn't invested in anything. And a lot of people are concerned that he's gotten too conservative in his views, and he's happy to just sit on cash, which hurts shareholders. So back to the previous slide, a lot of people that are invested in Berkshire Hathaway stock are looking at charts like this saying, how come our stock isn't doing as well as some of the other ones? And what's Warren Buffett doing? Has he lost his Midas touch, so to speak? Another item I just wanted to point out, I know this is a bit small, but essentially it's a chart just showing the longer you have to be in the stock market, the more chance you're going to have to make money. So if you're just going to be in the market for a single day, why not flip a coin or go to the casino at Riverside or Tama or something like that maybe have a little bit more fun than just being in the stock market, because you got basically a 50-50 chance of making some money. But the longer you can keep money in the stock market working for you over, essentially over the last 80, 90 years, if you've been able to have your money in the stock market for 5 to 10 years, there's over a 90% chance that you've made money during that stretch. Here's another chart kind of showing the same thing. Again, on a daily basis, it's really a coin toss as to whether or not the S&P 500 is up or down over the last 50 years. But the longer you go, if you're able to go 3, 5, or 10 years and have your money invested that whole time, there's an 86% chance or higher that you made money on any given day, the longer that you've had your money in the stock market. So just on to key number 2, just to switch gears here a little bit. One of the things that's happening and why I'm hammering on this so much is through the CARES Act, your employees have the ability, and so do you have the ability to take $100,000 out of your 401k and not pay the 10% penalty. And you've got time to pay that money back into your 401k or your IRA, wherever you happen to be taking it from. The issue is going to be, back to my earlier slide, people, if somebody's having to take that much money out of their 401k, they've probably got other issues that are unaddressed. And what's going to happen is that withdrawal, if they need that money that desperately right now, what's the likelihood they're going to be able to pay it back? And then whatever they can't pay back, they're going to have to pay state and federal income taxes on, which, let's just say you withdrew $100,000, that could very well be $30,000, $40,000, even $50,000 of taxes that you would have to pay if you didn't pay that back. And that doesn't even count for, well, how much would that money have grown over the next 5, 10, or 15 years? That's a huge concern, and it's going to add to our future retirement crisis. Key number 3, and I think this is an important part too, is never let a crisis go to waste. How can we turn bad into good? And I think this is a great opportunity, again, to stop, take a breath, and think about, how am I going to make better choices going forward? How am I going to learn from this terrible experience and make myself better off, make my employees better off, my family better off in the years to come? So again, just touching on this idea that there's going to be more crisis to come. In fact, if you look at this chart, basically every year or every other year, or certainly every 8 years, something like this is going to happen. We don't know what it is yet, but we need to start preparing for those times and figuring out, how are we going to weather this in the future? So I've come up with a few steps here for you to be thinking about, things that you could do either for or with your employees, or advice that you could potentially give them. And so the first thing is suggesting that they review their household budget. Now, in most families, there's usually one person. It's either the husband or the wife that takes care of the budget. But the reason that a lot of people struggle is that one person has control of the money. Now, in most cases, it makes sense to have one person pay all the bills and stuff like that. But it makes a lot more sense if both people know what's going on and are taking personal responsibility. This is probably the most dangerous step for most people, especially if they've been stuck at working from home with their spouse. Perhaps this could lead to marital strife, but it's still a necessary step, kind of like eating broccoli or drinking water or something like that. And looks like I got a glitch in my system here, if you guys can hang on with me. Sorry about that. Maybe I'm using too much bandwidth with all the talking I'm doing. I don't know.
Guys, just as we're going along, I'll remind everybody that if you have questions or anything like that for Craig, you are welcome to type them into the chat box. I'll just open that up over here. Questions here.
Well, I may have been kicked out of my server here. This will be inconvenient for everybody if we can't get this back up and running.
You could forward it, and I could run the slideshow for you.
Well, the difficult, that's something I should have done yesterday, unfortunately. Let's see what's going on here. Huh. Well, I have a full internet connection. It's interesting because through all of the all of this time, we have not had a disruption in service. I'm just going to real quick. I'm going to reboot my laptop here,
Sure.
and hopefully we can get a resolution and see if maybe that helps.
It's funny that you were just discussing that you'll always have a crisis about every 10 years.
Yeah, well, sometimes every 10 minutes. Well, and if as we're talking about this, just try and get logged in here quick. If we can't proceed with the slideshow, then you guys will get stuck listening to me lecture without slides, which maybe is more painful than with the slides. I'm not sure, but we still have some practical tips that we can hit on that will give people some takeaways if we can't get this up and running here in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, I'll just remind everybody that these webinars, so we kind of had to shift our focus for our normal on the menu programming, which is sponsored by our small business champions, which are Hills Bank, Community Savings Bank, and Cedar Rapids Bank and Trust, excuse me. As well as Blue Sky Productions. And so we are thankful to those folks who sponsor these events. We've all had to kind of make some adjustments during this time. And I'm a social person, so that's been kind of a difficult thing for me. And I know several of you on this call are the same way. And so one thing that I've just been really thankful for during this COVID-19 pandemic is technology. And it's forced us to kind of use some tools that we don't normally use. And so I'm just grateful that we're still able to connect in this way. So again, thanks for being on the call, and thank you to our small business champions. Also, I know we have some financial planners, and a lot of you all work with the business community, in particular the small business community. On Fridays, we are hosting calls with the Small Business Development Center. Scott Swenson is available from like 1:30 to 2:30 every Friday. We're doing it in a question and answer format. And if you know of a business that has questions about the assistance programs that are out there, or just about good small business practices as we look at re-entering our workplaces, that's a great place to kind of bring those questions up. And it's just been a a good format. We've had a lot of good conversations come out of that. So we wanted to throw that out there.
Getting a little closer here, Jill. Looks like my screen is back up.
All right.
I'm going to see if I can share. Oops. It looks like I'm gonna have to rejoin the Zoom meeting. Can you give me that meeting ID again?
Yeah, let's see here.
Sorry, folks. Thanks for hanging in here with must be my Iowa State education. Even though we've invented the computer, maybe not all of us are trained on using it. I don't know.
You said it, man. Let's see. Okay, the meeting ID is 163 988 573.
Okay.
And you need the password?
I'm just a second. 666440. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, let's see if we can get this rolling again. I'm going to breeze through my slides here, so hopefully I don't give anybody motion sickness as we get to where we need to be. And we'll hope that the internet connection stays with us. So again, we're just to kind of recap, we're finally to the meat and potatoes of, hey, how can we help our employees and how can we be helping ourselves? So we just got done talking about reminding your employees now's a great time to be reviewing your household budget. And this is not a finger pointing time or anything like that. It's just trying to get an understanding of where do we spend our money. You know, this is adulting 101. What do we need to do to take care of our finances? Another easy thing, and again, these are all free things that people can do. So if money is tight and people want to do something, rather than cashing out their 401k, which I just got done telling you, I think is a terrible idea. Here's some free things that you can be doing if you've got extra time on your hands and want to take action. Well, changing your tax withholding. Most people just filed their income taxes because we didn't know we were going to get an extension to July. If you're somebody that's getting a big refund, you should really you're sharing that money with the government for all year. And it's something that maybe could be in your paycheck each month. Or maybe you aren't withholding enough. And so not only are you ending up with a big tax bill in April, but you're also probably paying a penalty for under withholding. And again, just kind of wasting money, so to speak. What's another thing that we can do? Well, something really easy, and this is a basic thing that we do for all of our clients. And I know Peg Frazier and some others are on the call that are advisors. This is what they do for their clients. Review your beneficiaries. So simple. There are all kinds of horror stories about people who left on their ex-spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend or parent. In fact, I had a situation a couple of years ago where unfortunately one of my clients was dying of cancer. So as we were going through all of his beneficiary information, we found out that it wasn't both of his parents listed on his life insurance. He wasn't married. Not that both parents weren't listed. The only person that was listed was his dad. And his dad had died 3 years before. So if my client hadn't updated that, he would have passed away. His dad's estate, which had been closed for several years, would have gotten a check, and whoever, it probably would have been his mom, would have had to mess around fixing all that stuff. Versus we were able to get a form from the insurance company, fill it out, He signed it, we turned it in, and then unfortunately he passed away. But that money went directly to his mom within 10 days of us making a death claim. So again, this is just a simple thing. And then don't forget about your other accounts. If you have bank accounts, or if you have um, other investment accounts that aren't 401k or aren't IRA, there's ways to add beneficiaries to those accounts, or just get them listed and make sure everybody knows where they're at, and you've got updated statements and some of those things. Another thing that you can do, update the beneficiaries on your life insurance policy. Again, I was given the example of life insurance, but we also updated this guy's 401k information. Very simple things and very, very free. Other things that you can do. Again, this is not my area of expertise, but I know my colleague Peg Frazier is on the call here, and that's something that she helps her clients with. And I'm sure there's other people. My PNC person does this same thing for me. But be proactive. Find out, what coverages do you have? What are there things that you could be doing different or better? A lot of us just went through a hailstorm and stuff like that. So there may be other reasons to meet with your property and casualty agent. I talked about it earlier, rebalancing your 401k and other investments. Do you have money where it should be? Are you taking too much risk? Now's a great time to take stock, and understanding, no pun intended, but now's a great time to take stock and figure out, what am I doing and why am I doing what I'm doing? And can I handle the risks that are associated with it? If I can't, make a change. It's okay to make a change, but have some reasons behind it. Again, here's just a real quick slide showing, instead of trying to chase the best mutual fund from last year in your 401k, or being contrarian and putting all of your money in the worst performing investment, thinking it's got to get better the next year. In this particular case, a blended strategy of those things, a well-balanced portfolio, actually not only has less risk, but you have a better return. So you're still going to be on a roller coaster, but there's not going to be as big hills, as big of drops, and as many thrills. So sometimes boring is better for a lot of people. Another easy thing to do is get on the Social Security website, ssa.gov, and create your online Social Security ID and password so that you can look at your Social Security benefits. We are finding more and more that as people change in and out of jobs in the workforce and stuff like that, their Social Security benefits haven't been reported correctly. And if you still have those old tax returns, this is a great way to go back to Social Security and say, hey, 4 years ago, I changed jobs, and it looks like only one of my employers reported my earnings for that year. You send in your W-2s. You may have to add some additional information, but get that updated, because that could be costing you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars later if you don't have your Social Security benefits correct. This is self-serving. I guess I was making the slides. I probably should have put this as number 1, but it really doesn't matter whether you do it yourself or if you have a financial advisor or you're thinking about having a financial advisor. Most advisors offer a free consultation. Maybe now's a good time to have a web meeting with them if you can't meet them in person, and start going through some of these steps together. Now, I came up with an additional 9 actions that employees could be taking. These aren't free, but they still are things I think would be valuable. The first one, getting started on an emergency savings account. Now, technically that's free. You can do it yourself, but if your income has been reduced or you've been laid off or something like this, technically this costs money. So I'm just trying to be fair in the way that I'm explaining this, is that money has to come from somewhere. You're not spending it on something, you're saving it. And so there is technically an expense to that. What we try and encourage our clients to do is really try and get between 6 and 12 months worth of emergency savings in case there's something like this. We don't have to hit the panic button. We don't have to take money out of our 401k and pay taxes, and in normal years pay a penalty, because we've got money in reserve, and it doesn't have to be in the stock market. Again, some of these are simple tips, things you might already know, but when your brain is all jacked up or hijacked, or your amygdala is hijacked, if you can just take a step back and do the simple things, sometimes that's really is the best course of action. A lot of people, when times are crazy like this, they want to do something. I gotta fix this, or I gotta. Well, how about doing some simple things like these? Uh, these these action items that we're putting out here. These are easy things that can be done. They don't take a lot of time and thought, and typically are going to push you closer to accomplishing your goals than messing around on your 401k and trying to figure out what mutual fund to be in, or should I be in the market or out of the market, stuff like that. So, perfect example. If you're worried about the market, man, I need to make 10%, but I have a credit card where I'm paying 20% interest. Again, this is coming from somebody that helps companies set up 401ks and clients that we help them manage 401ks. Pay off your high interest debt. That's an anchor. The sooner we can get rid of that, the sooner we can get back to worrying about saving for retirement. But if you don't have this stuff taken care of, there's not as much that we can do for it. In fact, you're probably taking one step forward and two steps back. Another thing that people could be considering, which I know this is super high on everybody's list, hey, let's call an attorney and meet with them. Well, I don't know if that's better or worse than meeting with a financial advisor. I'm pretty sure it's worse, but I'm probably biased in that regard. Figure out where your will is. Do you even know where it is? Do you even have one? You'd be amazed at the number of people that I meet that have raised a family and sent kids off to college, and they own a business or they own a farm or something like that. Never had a will. Well, when you don't have a will and when you don't have powers of attorney, that's when attorneys make all their money, and that's when the state of Iowa gets really involved in telling your loved ones what to do after you're gone, which that's bad planning. Again, self-serving, maybe hiring a financial advisor to figure out, how am I going to cope with these future downturns? Because I'm telling you right now, there's going to be more. We don't know exactly what they're going to be, when they're going to be, how bad they're going to be, but they're going to happen. Other things to consider with the CARES Act, not only did the filing date for income taxes get pushed back to July 15th, you can actually still put money in for 2019 into a Roth IRA or a deductible or even a non-deductible IRA for yourself and your spouse, assuming that you had income in 2019. So for those people who are under 50, you can put away $6,000. For those who are over 50, you can put in $7,000. Other things to consider, again, going back to the property and casualty thing, do I need to update? Do I need more coverage? Should I have an umbrella policy? Especially, again, if we have a hailstorm or something like that, maybe for some reason or another, your policy doesn't cover this or that, but an umbrella policy makes sure that you're covered from all angles. Other things to think about, and this is not a sales pitch, but I do want to emphasize, with the Federal Reserve keeping interest rates low for a decade already, and they're probably going to be low for the next 5 to 10 years, at least the foreseeable future, insurance coverages are going to get more expensive because it's harder for insurance companies to make money on your money and pay you all the benefits. So naturally, prices are going to have to go up. So this sounds terrible, but I'm going to say it anyway. People ask me all the time, hey, I probably need to get long-term care insurance. When's the best time to do that? How about April 28th? Maybe you don't need it, but you should start looking into it and figuring out if it's part of your plan, because these things are going to increase in price, and why not lock in the lowest price you can, perhaps for the rest of your life, by doing something today. So number 8, maybe consider increasing your 401k deferral by 1% each year for the next few years until you can get to the maximum. Again, creating these cash accounts, but specifically for those people who are within at least 5 years of their intended retirement. So again, if we pretend that you're going to retire at 65, when you're 60, I believe all people, and this is free advice, we give it to our clients, we're giving it to you today, make sure you've got 12 months worth of all of your household expenses. If you're still carrying a mortgage, that means your mortgage. If you've already got um, uh, you know, insurances in place, and you've got car payments, or you're paying off kids' student loans, whatever those things are that you might be carrying into retirement, please, please, please strongly consider putting 12 months worth of those expenses away prior to turning 65. I know it's not easy, it never is, but even though that money just needs to be in a savings account earning 0.5%, remember how I told you before, it's okay to have money in cash. The whole reason we want this money in cash before you retire is Murphy's Law says when I retire at 65, the very next day is when we get coronavirus 2 and the market goes down 35%. You do not want to be stressing out about that when you leave your job or when you sell your business to another business owner and ride off into the sunset. We want to have cash to weather these types of storms. Okay, so here's the transition. We're going from talking to employees to talking about yourself. I'm going to breeze through this a little bit since we had a technology issue that kind of messed us up there for 5 or 10 minutes and got us off our game. But I still think this is important. Some of this is going to be repetitive, but what's good for the goose is good for the gander, so to speak. So got a couple of extra things in here for business owners. So these are the free things that you can do as a business owner. And obviously you're going to recognize this stuff. We're talking about the household budget again. I really, really think that that's important, especially on times like this when money gets tighter. If you can figure these things out now, this is what I would consider to be marriage insurance. If you can figure out your budget and work with your spouse on these things, that's a great way to be married for a long time and not divvying up what's left half and half. Other things that I think people should be considering that are business owners, take a good look at your personal balance sheet and your business balance sheet. Work with your personal advisors, your attorney, your banker, CPA, your financial advisor. Figure out who can be helping you review those things and start figuring out what you can be doing business-wise as we come out of this crisis. Other things that you can do, you can look at your tax withholding. Do you still owe money? Do you tend to have to pay a big bill at the end of the year? Well, if your sales are down and business is running pretty lean, you may not have the money to do this stuff. So talking with your banker about extending you a different line of credit so you can pay your taxes is a good thing. Also making sure that the IRS isn't holding too much of your money that you could be using to advertise while others aren't, or pay your employees, or whatever it happens to be. Especially important for business owners, making sure you've got life insurance in place. A lot of personal net worth of business owner is tied up in their business, which is fine. I'm the same way, but being I do what I do, I also have a lot of life insurance, and that's something that you can make sure is up to date and appropriate for your situation. Again, updating beneficiaries on 401ks and other savings statements. Reviewing your personal insurance coverages. And almost all business, I can't think of a reason, maybe we'll have somebody chime in here that sells property and casualty. I can't think of a reason a business owner wouldn't have an umbrella policy, but if you don't have one, that'll be coming in a little bit. You should be looking at getting one. Again, reviewing and updating coverages for your business. Rebalancing your 401k and other investments. Creating your online Social Security account. Again, these are kind of review from what I've told you to talk to your employees about. Again, self-serving, but again, I think important to, if you don't have advisors and you think you need some, now's the time to start interviewing for those people to try and join your team and help you figure out what you need to do. Revisit your exit strategy. This is probably the elephant in every business owner's main office is they don't really know when they're leaving their business. And so if you haven't thought about that and 2009 financial crisis didn't get your attention, you're now 10 or 11 years farther into your business. And if you don't have an exit strategy, now's the time to be getting that figured out. The 12 action steps that Probably aren't free. They're probably going to cost you some money, but I still think would be a good idea. Again, getting that emergency account built up. Reviewing the lines of credit that you've got. Do you have enough? Are there different things you can be doing? I think we all found out that if we were looking for some of these stimulus checks from the government, some of these loan programs, if we didn't have a good relationship with our bank or banker, a lot of the people that did, or the people that could afford a team of legal advisors, they sure as heck got their application in. And now's probably a time to figure out, hey, is my banker helping me? Do I have the right relationship? What do I need to be prepared for the next time around? Again, looking at, just like on the personal side, building up appropriate savings. Do you have a cash reserve for your business? It's one thing to have a line of credit, but a lot of us found out in '09 that if you weren't using that line of credit, the bank froze it. So at the very time you needed credit, you couldn't get access to it. Well, a lot of times just business checking and savings, money market is a great way to go. Cash value life insurance for some people is a great way to be able to borrow for future needs. But just figure out what your plan is and make sure you've got the steps in motion to take care of those things. Again, being aggressive about paying down high interest debt. The less debt you've got, the less you have to make payments when times are tough. Again, probably as important for business owners as it is for individuals, getting with your attorney and figuring out what a lot of these new rules have to do, especially with retirement accounts. Two major pieces of legislation were passed in really the last 3 months. We had the Secure Act passed in December, and then we had the CARES Act that was passed here in March. Two major pieces of legislation that dramatically change the tax code as well as estate planning. So again, not fun to go and visit the attorney and have some legal bills, but maybe spending $1,000 or $2,000 now saves you $100,000 later. Again, all these self-serving financial advisors want you to come meet with them. Just another thing to think about. Funding IRAs or Roth IRAs. Certainly if you're a business owner and you've got a 401k in place, if you haven't also added a Roth 401k, I think this is a great tax hedge for business owners to be using. Again, making sure you've got the right insurance coverages in place. Once again, getting up on the pedestal there, insurance coverages are probably going to cost more. If this is something that you're thinking about doing or think that you might need, go talk to your agent and figure out what you should be doing. If anything, maybe you don't need to do anything at all, but just check it out. Again, this idea that you're going to sell your business at some point, or at least hopefully, start thinking about what your strategy is to fund your retirement and your lifestyle once you've sold the business, or if you happen to be in a situation where you just have to close the door and can't sell the business, how are you going to fund your retirement outside of Social Security? Because most business owners don't have a pension set up for themselves. It's time to be looking into this, especially if you're 50, 55, 60, you still have time to do some things to get yourself set up. Other things to consider, again, this 12 months of savings prior to retirement, just sitting in cash, ready for a terrible event like this. I would strongly suggest talking to an exit planner or a business transition specialist. The sooner, we're all going to leave our business. I'm going to leave my business. You're going to leave your business. We might get disabled. We might die. Those are two bad options. Ideally, we'd want to sell it. But regardless of how we leave our business, we need to have a plan in place. I have to work on mine all the time. You have to work on yours. Again, it's like eating broccoli or peas or whatever vegetable you don't like. Making sure that you've got those things in place and talking to the right people who can help you figure out, how do I help my business weather this storm, and how do I take the next step? So again, a lot of action steps, both for employees and yourself. Just choose a couple. Just choose a couple. Choose to be successful. Choose a couple of these action steps. If you don't know what to do, ask for help. That's what the chamber is here for. Little shameless plug, you're certainly welcome to contact our office, but Jill also has my contact information. But I really, part of the reason I'm a chamber member and a Medco member is these are great resources for business owners in our community, and we should be taking advantage of them. And there's a lot of resources right here. A lot of people are actually chamber members just like you. And so, why not reach out to those people to help you with whatever it is that you need? We've got multiple banks that are sponsors of this program. Now's a great time to be reaching out to the sponsors and figuring out how they can best help. So with that, am I sharing just me now instead of my screen?
Yes, you are. Yep.
Okay. Well, thanks for hanging in there with me with the technology struggles. I appreciate your guys' perseverance.
Yeah, you bet, Craig. Thank you so much for sharing these important reminders. We do have a couple of questions. It looks like
Okay.
in our chat box. Let's see here. I already filed my taxes for 2019. If I make a contribution to my 2019 Roth now, can I report that on my 2020 taxes, or would I have to refile 2019?
Nope, you don't have, because the Roth is after tax money, you do not have to amend your 2019 return if you've already filed. And in fact, you'll get something called the 5498 form that you'll get in May. Now this year might be a little squirrely. Maybe they'll be coming out later, but typically they come out in May. Just keep that either with your 2019 return or put it with the information for your 2020 return, just so your tax preparer knows that you made a contribution. But no, you don't have to refile your taxes for that purpose. Great question.
Great. Any other questions out there? Peg, I see it looks like you were busy helping a lot of people with hail claims.
Yes, and continuing to do so. It was a broad swath. Country Financial was born and raised in Illinois, so following carefully with our claims adjusters who are out of the Moline Claims Division, the swath started in Illinois, went into the Quad Cities, and went all the way up to Marion and north. And so areas of Cedar Rapids, Hiawatha, and also heavily hit Marion. Any individual that I insure in Marion, for the most part, either lost the entire roof or a good portion of it, along with some other major damage. So I'd urge you, particularly if you live in the Marion area, looking at a roof is very difficult to really ascertain if there is damage, especially architectural shingled roofs. Those are the patterned roofs. If you have any question whatsoever, you might want to have someone take a look at it and or file a claim, as there's a good chance every one of my clients in Marion is getting a new roof. So I'd urge you to make sure that you have someone take a good look at that. Oftentimes it won't present until you are well along the way. And typically most companies require you file a claim 1 year from the incident.
Okay, that's great advice. Great advice. We have another question here, Craig. What's the best way to summarize all your personal finances to know where you stand overall and enable yourself to better weigh your standing? Like, is it a spreadsheet, or do you have any tools that you could recommend?
Well, we do, but obviously that's what we do for our clients. So we're actually creating written financial plans for them. Obviously you can access them via the web or whatever, but it's an actual analysis. It's a really, really fancy spreadsheet. Spreadsheet's probably the easiest thing that you can do. I'm sure there's a number of tools online. The one thing that I always caution people about when using online tools to help with their personal finances are those companies make money tracking your accounts, what you do with those dollars, what your budget is, and stuff like that. And so for the free part of it that you get, which there's nothing wrong with that, but in this particular information technology economy, you are trading your personal private information for free usage, as opposed to if you were to come and talk to a financial advisor. We don't want that shared with anybody. We want to protect our clients because We don't want them to go somewhere else. But then also we just know that that's their personal private information. And we wouldn't want our stuff strung all over the internet or things like that. So probably an Excel spreadsheet, if you're a do-it-yourselfer, is probably the easiest thing to do. And I would just start with the household budget. How much money do we have coming in? How much money do we have going out? And then, you know, you can use some rules of thumb as far as, you know, how you might get certain returns, like an 8% return in your investment account. You know, you're going to double your money every 8.5, 9 years and stuff like that. So there's a few things like that, but ultimately, I'm going to admit it, I'm biased. This is what I do for a living. And so we try and get people to sit down and just have a conversation, not only about the numbers, but what we're really aiming for is to try and get people to identify what they value. Is it family? Is it education? Is it your church? Whatever it is in your world, what are your values? Let's get those listed and figured out. And then let's match your budget, your spending, your investing. We're going to match your money with what you say is important to you, so that when we have times of crisis, again, I know I talked a lot about brain science and things that you probably weren't expecting to hear, but those are the things that get in the way of making good decisions when the chips are down or when there's struggle and strife and stuff like that. If you're solid in your values and then you have your finances built around that, it just makes the decision-making process much easier and less stressful. So, but I'm sure there's tons of tools out there, but I just think either buying a 50-cent notebook and getting a pencil with an eraser is a good tool. And so would be like an Excel spreadsheet, and just start with the basics.
Great. Good advice. What about, you mentioned, you know, is kind of, what's the hierarchy of paying off like your larger expenses? I know you mentioned get the cars paid off. We're experiencing, as you mentioned, probably some of the lowest interest rates that we might ever see in our lifetime. What's the priority of getting the house paid off?
I would say very low. Again, this is general advice, so please don't take this the wrong way. I'm just answering a general question, but I would tell you that because interest rates are so low on mortgages, and because of the change in the standard deduction back with the 2017 Tax Act that was changed, we're in historically low interest rates and low tax environments. So we are promoting to all of our clients Roth IRA contributions, Roth IRA conversions, and also don't be so quick to pay off the house, especially if you have other debt. And so I would certainly say, again, just even though I'm not a Dave Ramsey advisor or something like that, I definitely have always, it just makes a lot of sense to me. I like his style, and I really believe that paying off high interest debt is ultimately the key to wealth, because it ends up weighing you down. So if you have a Visa card at 18% or 22% or whatever they're charging, can you find a credit card with one of your local banks or credit unions or something that has a lower interest rate, and do a balance transfer and be very aggressive about, well, the new rate is 1.9%, but I've got 12 months. Well, if I have a $10,000 balance at 20% and I could pay a small fee, a couple $100 to move it to a low interest credit card, and then start paying $1,000 a month towards that, within a year, you might even have it all paid off. And so I would definitely start with the highest interest things first. But if you do, the caveat to that would be, let's just say that you had a $20,000 student loan at 8%, and you had a 20% Visa card with a $10,000 balance, and then you also had, I don't know, a car loan with $1,000 left on it, and it was at 3% interest. Well, if you had a couple $1,000, I'd actually pay off that low interest car loan first, just to get it out of the way, because it's such a small bill. And because the payment was probably $300 or $350 a month, that now frees up that $300 or $350 a month to go towards your student loan or your credit card. So if your student loan was at 10 and the Visa card is at 20, once you knocked out that low interest car loan with not very much of a balance left, then I just start attacking the Visa card. But of course, along with that is making sure that whatever you put on the Visa card, you can pay that off at the end of the month plus the extra. If you're just treading water, well, you're going to have to make some lifestyle changes. So I hope that answers your question.
Definitely. All right. Any other questions out there, everybody? All right. I'm seeing none. We sure appreciate you, Craig, giving
Yes, Greg.
this presentation today. Great to see everyone. Peg, good to see you. And just a reminder to everybody, we have the SBDC call, Small Business Development Center call with Scott Swenson on Friday. And again, a big thanks to our small business champions for making this event possible. I hope everybody has a great week, and I hope to see you in person soon.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Jill.
Yep, you bet. All right, bye-bye.